In the last guide to Redstone, I showed you how to make a bunch of different piston doors, and how to use item sources to be able to use different locks for your doors. This is by far the longest guide that I've had on the series, but this next one is going to be one of the smallest. Now we're going to be going over how to use crafters and the additional features of comparators to make the most of the crafters. And as I said, we're just going over crafters and comparators. You can think of crafters pretty much just like a crafting table, aside from a few main differences. Of course it looks different, but you can't just directly take the item out of its slot. It has to be powered by redstone to be able to craft. Hoppers can be directed into crafters to be able to put their items in automatically. As you can see, I've got the recipe for an observer here. If I had to press this button to fill the hoppers, all the items are being flooded into the crafter. One thing you might have noticed is that the items are being added in order of how much they need it. Pretty much the items with the lowest stack amount are being filled first with higher priority. If I were to remove half of this cobblestone, that cobblestone is going to be filled until it's even with all the rest of them. And whilst the crafter can be powered with redstone to output its result, you can also place a barrel in front of it for it to place it in directly. You could put hopper underneath a crafter to be able to siphon its result, but there's a problem with this. If I were to unpower this hopper with logs in to go into the crafter, I can unlock this hopper. You can see that the items are being taken out without it finishing crafting. This is quite a problem, but that's why you've got the feature to be able to place items in containers. The hoppers don't care if the crafters haven't made anything, it's just going to take the items directly out of it. A small setup you could do is have a few hoppers with their ingredients inside, going into a crafter, with a small clock to keep crafting it constantly. But there's a problem with this, and you'll start to see why if I just wait a minute. The crafter's made about 2 stacks of repeaters, but there's a problem with the crafter. It's run out of stone too quickly, so another ingredient has taken its place. Now that's quite a problem if you want this to be consistent and don't have to fix it all the time. This is where some other handy designs come in place. Making a useful design with crafters isn't really possible without comparators. Comparators are able to check if a crafter is full or not, along with if they have many slots disabled. If I were to put a gold ingot in here, it would craft it immediately and turn it into gold nuggets. That's because the comparator is checking for any items inside the crafter and will immediately power it. But there's also a problem with this. If you were to disable any of the slots, the comparator would think there's items inside, and it's going to power it. And you won't be able to craft anything until it's unpowered again. So let's go a little bit more into comparators with crafters. Unlike everything else that comparators can be linked to, it's a bit different with crafters. Usually a comparator can output a signal strength of 15, but with a crafter, its maximum signal strength is 9. That's to symbolise the amount of slots that's in the crafting menu. A comparator's signal strength grows by 1 for every slot that is filled inside a crafter, so the maximum will be 9. If I were to completely fill these slots, it's only just able to reach this repeater to circle back to the crafter. If I were to get a hopper full of items, however, you can see that the signal strength is much stronger. So this can be useful for things like if I were to put a stack of gold ingots into the crafter, it's going to constantly fill up and craft once it's full. But there's 2 big problems with this. Number 1 is that it's really bulky and it takes up a lot of space. And the second one is that if it's filled up too quickly, then it's not going to craft again, because the repeater will constantly be lit. So this is where we go into the final features of the comparator. The side inputs of a comparator have 2 functions, compare and subtract. You might have noticed messing around with a comparator that it has a little switch at the front. That shows if it's in compare or subtract mode. When it's unlit, it means it's in compare. When it's lit, it's in subtract. But what does this even mean? The comparator is going to compare either one or both of the signals from the side and compare it with the one behind it. If the ones on the side are stronger than the one behind it, then it's not going to power at all. If I were to power this to page 5, signal strength of 5, we're going to get level 5 redstone coming out of it. However, if we're to put the side ones into 6, it's not going to be powered anymore. Now the main useful one for crafters is subtract mode. It pretty much does what it says in the tin, but let's go over it in a bit more detail. This redstone lamp needs a signal strength of 6 to be able to power. So let's give it a signal strength of 6. Oh, but it's not powered. This is because the side inputs are giving it a power level 1. The comparator will only subtract the strongest strength that's coming from its side. So if this was a power level 3, and this was power level 1, because 3 is the strongest inside, it's only going to subtract 3. You can see here, these 3 are not powered. So if we just add an extra 3 to the power signal of this middle comparator, it's going to be able to power the lamp, because 9 take away 3 is 6, which is what is needed for this lamp to be lit. I might not have explained it the best, but the premise is there and you can mess with it all you like to be able to understand it more yourself. But this is how we were able to use it with crafters. We've got a comparator in compare mode coming out of a crafter ready to make stairs, and another comparator going into it linked to a crafter with its slots full. This means it's going to emit a power strength of 9. So when this comparator is going to be comparing this, any signal strength lower than 9 means it's not going to output anything at all. If we were to just input another set of oak planks, it's going to craft a set. This is because now that the crafter is full, it's emitting a power strength of 9, which is the exact same as the one in its side, which is able to output its full signal strength, allowing it to be powered. Now for most things like mob farms, for example iron or gold farms, you could probably just do with 2 observers locking into each other, with a crafter with its slots full. And you can just have it craft constantly. But there's a downside to this. If the input of your items is slower than the amount of time it takes to craft, then it's going to come into some problems. It could start crafting things like gold pressure plates or iron bars if you're using iron, because it's constantly crafting before it takes time to properly fill all the slots. I've made myself a basic crafter design which works for making things like redstone torches. If I were to put these hoppers into the sides, it's going to keep crafting torches, and it'll keep doing that until these hoppers are empty. But how does it work? Obviously when a crafter is full of components, a hopper can't add any more, so it's going to keep the items in here. That's where a comparator will check the contents behind this block. So you can see in this hopper there's a bunch of sticks still in there because the sticks are full. So this comparator is lit, which is unpowering this torch. But because this hopper is empty, that makes this redstone torch be lit, which is powering this redstone dust. That disables this clock, which would originally just power this redstone repeater, to continuously activate the crafter. So if I were to add the redstone dust here, you can see the redstone clock is constantly activating the repeater, and it's able to keep crafting. Now these next 2 designs can be a little bit complicated, and I will say before anything that these designs are not mine. These are by Razeworks. I've linked his video in the description, but I've just included them here to be able to describe to you what's going on with them and how to build them properly step by step. So as with most crafter systems, we've got a crafter facing down going into a barrel, and we've got a bunch of barrels with hoppers. We're just going to remove the barrels to make this easier to see. This design works by making use of the subtraction mode of comparators. These hoppers have a lot of items inside, but they're not completely full. Comparators are obviously able to tell if they've got items, but because it's not completely full, it's being subtracted by a higher power, meaning that it's not going to output anything from here. Once these are full, it's going to be able to emit power because the subtraction affecting the comparator is not going to stop it from unpowering these torches. So when these are both full, these torches turn off, and the signal strength is able to come through these repeaters, which goes for a long delay, which is able to power this block, which will temporarily close off these comparators because it's giving them the max signal strength, power the crafter to craft 1, and because of the delay from these repeaters, the hoppers are able to fill up all the slots in the recipe with items before it's able to craft again. It's confusing, but let's build through it and show you how it works properly. For this you're going to need a 3x7 space, with a little bit of space for a hole in the ground too. It doesn't matter where your crafter is facing so long as it's out of the way of your redstone, but for now I've just put it into the ground. You could have it just facing forwards. With your 2 hoppers in the side of the crafter, we put 3 blocks in front of it, and 2 comparators coming out of the hoppers to check their contents. We're just going to put 2 redstone dust down here, and then 3 repeaters into this hole, all set to the maximum tick delay. This is so that when our items are full, it powers the block, which will power the redstone, subtracting from the comparators, and activating the crafter. I'm going to cover up a portion of the hole with some blocks, and put 2 redstone torches on top of the blocks in front of the comparators. Make sure you put both your comparators in subtract mode, and connect your redstone wire into these torches. You'll want 2 more repeaters coming out of the block that the comparator is facing into. Of course, they're all set to the maximum tick delay as well. I'm going to put 2 more blocks here, This is for no particular reason other than the blocks just look nicer. You could put redstone dust here, but it doesn't matter too much. Your redstone dust is going to go here. The purpose of this is just to power this block here, which the repeaters will pick up to go power your crafter. And that's it. All we need now is just to fill up the recipe and fill up the hoppers. For now, I've gone with a bow. We've got a hopper full of string, and a partially full hopper of sticks. Once I completely fill that hopper with sticks, it's going to start crafting bows. For a second I thought I made it wrong, but it was just me being dumb. You just need to make sure that your hoppers are always full, because if they're missing even one item, it's going to stop crafting. You can make this a bit faster depending on how small your recipe is, but for the example I showed here with the glass, it's just because there's 7 slots needing glass, and it takes a while for a singular hopper to provide that. This final design is extremely useful for crafting nearly every component in the game. It's able to craft anything with 3 different ingredients in the recipe. This one is also by Razeworks. I have made my own designs in the past, but they were never as compact as this one, so that's the reason I'm showing it. This design also makes use of the subtract feature of comparators. We can remove the barrels from the top as they're not really needed to show this build, along with the chest. The 3 hoppers here are for inserting 3 different ingredients. For this example, I'm using observers. All 3 of these comparators are checking for contents within these hoppers, with a slight difference for this one. We've got a lever constantly powering this redstone, which will give this a power level 14 redstone dust. This means that it's going to subtract 14 from anything this comparator tries to output, so it needs to be 15. What this means is that this hopper needs to be completely full to be able to do anything. The repeaters down here are just for a redstone clock, which will loop backwards and forwards to continuously craft the component inside. But this redstone clock is stopped by these redstone torches here. Because this comparator is detecting that this hopper is not completely full, this redstone torch is lit, which is stopping this clock from moving. If I were to add another hopper on top, the hopper is no longer partially full, and it's able to continuously craft observers. However, the moment it's not full, it stops. I really like this design for the 3 different ingredients because you can choose which ingredient is going into this hopper. That'll allow you to put the more expensive items in the other hoppers. Now we'll go into building it. This one's quite straightforward as well. The only complicated parts are just the mechanics behind it. You can just easily build it along with me. We'll start off with the redstone clock at the bottom. You can either put your crafter 1 block above the ground or put your redstone clock 1 block below. But just for demonstration purposes, I've put the crafter above 1 block. The redstone torch will go into this block, and we want something to power that block, so our repeater will go there. All the repeaters are set to maximum tick delay, and these are both going into 2 blocks. Keep in mind which direction your repeaters are facing, so you're able to build the clock properly. If you attach this redstone properly, you should see that the clock is working. We're just going to expand this redstone dust by 1. This is because there's going to be another redstone torch above it, which needs to be able to tell the redstone clock to stop. We're going to put our 3 hoppers into the crafter. And we want blocks on these 2 so that we can align all our comparators next to each other. It doesn't matter which mode these comparators are in, whether they're in compare or subtract, but you do need this one in subtract. In front of these 3 comparators, you want a block in front of each one with a redstone torch connected to it. And that's nearly it. All you need to do is have 2 blocks here, with redstone coming into the comparator, and a lever to power it. You could even have another comparator going into it. What matters most is that you have a power level of 14 going into this comparator. Now all that's left to do is to shape your recipe and fill in your hoppers. For this one, I'm just going to do campfires. Out of these 3 ingredients, I probably have the most of sticks, so I'm going to put them into the hopper that has the comparator being subtracted. The rest of these, I can just add the other 2. And now, if I look into this chest, campfires are slowly being made, but do remember to fill up your hoppers, because I keep forgetting myself. And that's everything about the basics of crafters along with a couple designs. It's the smallest amount to learn, but it can be the most complicated because it brings in some complicated features of comparators, and is more convenient to have more compact builds for it to make sense. But I promise the next guide is going to be a lot easier. In fact, it's hardly going to use redstone at all. The next video is going to cover over water streams and how to organise your redstone better.